Welcome to the EntrePastors podcast on YouTube. This is a show that helps pastors think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the EntrePastors podcast on YouTube. My name is John Sanders. I'm one of the co-hosts for the show. And guys, we've got a good one for you today. You're going to hear an interview that Les and I did a while back with Pastor Ryan Hayden. He's a pastor in a small church in a small town in Illinois, but he's been very successful in business as a software developer. And we're grateful to have him in our EntrePastors membership community. I love that we're finding more and more pastors out there like Ryan that are doing great things, both in ministry as well as the marketplace. And you're going to hear in this episode Ryan talk about how his church has benefited so much from his business that he runs and operates. And you're also going to hear him unpack how he feels like this is a model that many other small churches could look to for doing some really good things in their community and beyond. So without any further ado, let's cut to this interview that we did with Pastor Ryan Hayden. Check this out. Well, Ryan Hayden, welcome to the EntrePastors podcast, my friend. It's so good to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
I've been looking forward to our conversation with you, and I'm going to ask for you to start by just giving a kind of a brief introduction of yourself to our audience. Tell us a little bit about where you're serving in ministry, and then we'll unpack the business side of your story as well.
Okay, so I am the pastor at Bible Baptist Church in Mattoon, Illinois, which is the middle of nowhere in Illinois, right in the middle of the state. And I've been here at our church as the main pastor for 10 years. Prior to that, I served as a youth pastor, children's pastor, camp director at a church in Tennessee. And I served at a church in New Hampshire for a couple of years prior to that. Church is doing great, growing. It's not a huge church, but the Lord's blessing. And so ministry is fantastic. It's who I am.
Cool. Well, I actually know some people that had family in Mattoon, Illinois. I bet they probably went to your church way back in the day. So I came from Central Illinois myself. So
really, where are you from?
Peoria, Illinois is where I grew up.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I'm not from here. I grew up in New Hampshire, and I just somehow by hook and crook ended up in Mattoon, Illinois. My sister dated a guy in college who was from Terre Haute, Indiana, which is about an hour east of us. And we teased him, me and my brothers teased him mercilessly. We never called him by his name. We called him Corn Boy the entire time. We in our New England superiority looked down on him with all kinds of judgment. In God's sense of humor, I ended up like we go to Terre Haute, where he's from, when we want to go to a nice restaurant. So it's a
I love it. I love it. Well, hey, when you got into the EntrePastors Facebook group and introduced yourself and shared a little bit of your story, I immediately said, this is exactly the kind of pastor we want to highlight on our podcast, because I want more pastors to know that like your story is possible for them too. So if you don't mind, share a little bit of your story in terms of the entrepreneurial side of things and what you do outside of the four walls of the church, in addition to being a pastor.
Well, so I never really wanted to be an entrepreneur or a business person. I was a full-time pastor when I came here 10 years ago, and I just had a hobby of making software. Like I was just, for some reason, way back when I was in Bible college, I was infatuated with web development, the internet. In the early days, and I taught myself. I'd go to like Barnes and Noble in my first job at night, and I would like drink coffee and read their programming books because I couldn't afford them, and I just taught myself over years how to program. And the only thing I had in my mind was, I'm a pastor. I love churches. I just wanted to make software that made pastors' lives easier. And so I made several software programs over the years for making, quick websites and making like a library to house all your sermons. I made one for, generating like a church prayer request sheet to pass out, for a prayer meeting and plan your services. And, I made all kinds of different software. And it was pretty rudimentary. It was just me doing stuff. And at one point I was like, oh, I gotta go big. And so I did a Kickstarter. Someone told me I should do a Kickstarter because I need help. And I raised what I thought was a ginormous sum of money at the time. It was like $7,000 on that Kickstarter. I was like, yes, I can hire somebody for a couple months and really make something special. And what ended up happening was that $7,000 turned into like negative 30, like almost overnight. Like you have no idea how expensive it is to hire developers, and especially when you don't know what you're doing. And so I ended up personally with all of this debt, where I was making like $30,000 or probably less than that as a pastor. I had no idea how I was going to pay for it. And the only thing that I had was like, oh, I know how to program. And I know like how not to hire programmers now, and so I just said I guess I'll freelance for people, and it ended up starting an agency over time where I would find freelance developers and sort of manage freelance developers to do small projects for businesses. And eventually that led me to my current business partner, and we sort of went all in at the beginning of 2020. With my existing agency. And in the last 2 years, it's just grown like incredibly. So beginning of 2020, it was like me and one other guy. And now we're at like 20 employees. We blew past $1 million in revenue this year. And it's just been successful beyond my wildest imagination.
Wow.
So
that's
Ryan, what was the background of the other individual? What was your relationship like with him? How did that come about? Because one of the things that Jon and I are big proponents of is it's who, not how. And so many of those things take place because of relationships. So I mean, his and mine, EntrePastors, came about because of us getting to know one another and finding out that we have similar passions. So how'd that come about?
Well, when I was making software for churches, I kind of saw myself as like the little guy. And this particular guy was, he owned a successful church software company, printing company, design company. And he had a Facebook group. And I sort of thought of them as like the enemy, like
Yeah.
At one point, my goal in life was to take these people down, because like they charge too much. In my warped brain, this is what I thought,
Right.
and I just became friends with the owner. And when something happened to the main developer that he had working on a project, and he called me and he was like, "Hey, really impressed with your stuff. Would you like to work for us?" And so I worked with him, just me and him working on stuff together for about a year. And then we ended up working for his friends, and those were our first projects. And at this point, he has almost nothing to do with our business. He just, comes in maybe once a week or so for a 30-minute phone call and talks about stuff. But that was really the catalyst that kind of blew us up.
Mm.
So are you still just primarily focused on churches then with the software that you create? And do you do one thing, or do you do lots of different software?
No, we do software for anybody. We've done like mobile apps. We could do mobile apps in several different languages, iOS, Android. We've done desktop apps. We have done lots of web apps, web-based applications. We don't do websites. Like sometimes people are like, you do websites. Can you do my website? And it's like, no, that's like a shed. And we build like skyscrapers, like we're wanting to build like Facebook, not, a web page with your face on it. So like we do all kinds of stuff, and we work with all kinds of clients. We have several clients that are in that church space and have done software for church companies, like big companies that you've heard of. I can't tell you which ones, but we have completely done, whole software products for big companies that you've heard of that have 50, 60 developers that they have on staff. But we've also done, podcasts, several different podcasting apps. We've done apps for a landscaping company. My favorite app that we did this last year, somebody in California that kills squirrels on nut farms called us, and we made an app to help him kill squirrels on nut farms. It was the wildest thing, so we do all kinds of stuff, like big companies, and then small companies if they want to spend a little bit of money to make something that makes their business better.
I'm curious on the business side of it. Just something that you said there struck me as a little odd. So on and this may be down in the weeds a little much, but why would a company that has developers on their staff, capable, I assume, why would they hire you all?
Well, there's a good reason for that. Couple. First, it's because it's very, very hard to hire developers right now. Very hard. Developers are some of the most in-demand people in the world. So if you were to hire a developer in the United States, they're going to command a six-figure salary, and if they're good, and they're probably going to work in California or someplace like that. It's very hard to get these people. Onboarding takes months after you hire them. They're hard to get rid of if you don't like them, if they're not fitting out. And then there's just something about onboard teams, like in-house teams, they tend to be really slow. I might make some people mad by saying that. And we move really, really fast. Like, we can go from idea to finished product in 3 months. And in this particular case that worked for this company, we actually launched a whole app that's been used by thousands of churches in 2 weeks from the idea time they brought us it's held up. It's great. So they love us, and whenever they have a small project that they just don't have the bandwidth for, they reach out to us and we do it for them quickly.
I'm still stuck on an app that kills squirrels. As a deer hunter, I'm wondering what you can do to help me out with that. How does an app help somebody kill squirrels? You lost me there.
They have to mark where the squirrels are in the farm. So they have people that drive on four-wheelers up and down the rows of these nut farms looking for squirrels, gophers, whatever, and marking on an iPad between the handlebars where that is. And then they can show the farmer, hey, these are, like a map, like a heat map. These are where all your infestation is, and come up with a quote based on that.
That's incredible. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, hey, let's talk about the tension between being a pastor and having a heart for serving people in the church in a pastoral role, and then also navigating this, entrepreneurial thing, even though you didn't necessarily set out to be an entrepreneur. I really want to talk about the mindset, because I believe as pastors, kind of this traditional approach that we've been taught to ministry, like this is what pastoring looks like. We get very conditioned to low pay and lots of work and lots of expectations. And it becomes really this mental barrier that a lot of pastors have to even thinking it's possible, maybe even that it's okay for them to earn a good income. So how did you navigate that as you started to really see your business explode and you're starting to work with figures that you probably never thought possible certainly in the church realm? How did you manage, walking through some of that?
I mean, it was difficult. There was a little bit of guilt, in my mind, because I didn't come from a poor family. When I went into the ministry, there are parts of my family that are not Christian. My dad and his whole side of the family, they did a full court press. They just did not want me to go into the ministry. And they were like, you're never going to make any money. You're just going to, end up middle of nowhere. They tried everything they possibly could. And so it was sort of what?
They were right about half of that.
They were. Yeah. It's kind of ironic. Yeah. I love it. It's like, I probably make more money than any of you ever did, but it, it was sort of being a poor pastor was almost like my identity, it was something that I was proud of. And I didn't really seek this out. Like literally I had to pay this debt off or go bankrupt. Like not that I had anything for them to take anyways, uh, and I had to pay this debt off. So I had to keep working and was doing it, nights and weekends, just trying to get stuff done. And the Lord blessed that effort. And now it's like, it was a really, I still struggle with it sometimes, to be honest with you, because it was just not something I ever set out to do. I never set out to make a lot of money. So,
when you say you still struggle with it, like, tell me more about that. Like, what does that look like for you to struggle with the financial success?
well, I mean, the Bible says that, First Timothy, that a bishop is supposed to be somebody that's not greedy of filthy lucre, right? So it's like there is a expectation of pastors that you're not somebody that's chasing dollar signs. And I am not personally, I am not motivated by money. I never have been. It drives my business partners because neither of them are in the ministry. It drives them nuts sometimes because it's like, it's not what moves the needle for me at all. But I pastor in a poor town. I mean, it's your typical Rust Belt small city that 10, 15 years ago had several really, really strong factories making, paving machines, making paper, and those have closed. And so my town is like very economically recessed. Most of the people in my church work in a factory. They're lucky if they make $25 an hour, and if I charge per hour, for me personally, it would be like $200 or $300 an hour. That would be my hourly rate at this point. And I don't want to put myself, I'm still their pastor and I love them. And I don't want to put myself in a spot where I am, like living so high above them that I can't relate to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Or causing them to covet, causing them to want things that are just not in the cards for them, not part of God's plan for them. So that's what I mean when I say I struggle with it. I understand, Abraham was fantastically wealthy. You read the Old Testament, like the Lord blessed all these people with phenomenal wealth. Solomon, I understand that. I don't think there's anything wrong at all with me making a lot of money. It's coming from the Lord. I'm going to use it for the Lord. It's just the mental struggle is like, okay, now how do I keep my life from creeping into, like displays of wealth that put me aside, or how do I not talk about this all the time when it's such a big part of my life?
Yeah, and I would imagine that it's because I've run into this with many other pastors who are successful in business. They don't have an arena within their normal church life, church family. Like it's just not generally a safe place for them to come to their church family and go, man, praise God. I had a $50,000 week in business, like my business did incredible this week. Like that's just not the safe environment for that pastor usually to say that and celebrate that. And yet for people who are achieving and doing well in life, we need some people that we need those environments where we can celebrate one another and be celebrated, and where it's okay to applaud our success and where it's normal. So I'm assuming like you might identify with that. Like it's not easy to show up at, Sunday morning and talk from the pulpit openly about how well business is doing.
Yeah. I mean, it's something I try not to talk about from the pulpit at all. I mean, I don't hide it. I've used illustrations before and told people, that I own a successful business, but it's something that I feel like it's not that it's not a safe thing. The church appreciates, and we can get into this later, but the church appreciates where I'm coming from as far as the finances and stuff like that. It's just it's just different. But I will say this, since since there's been business success, it's attracted a whole other kind of people to my church that didn't come here before. So we have the people that have been joining lately are people that are far more successful in the eyes of the world than would have been attracted to our church 5 years ago. And I think there's obviously a reason for that, So.
And what do you think that reason is? Simply because it's being led by someone who's having success?
Yeah, I think so. I think they recognize, having one conversation with these people, they recognize, oh, it's interesting. Like here's a pastor that owns $1 million software business, that's different. And so that it gives them, I don't know, it makes them feel like, well, I want to listen to this guy. Why is he still pastoring?
Yeah. Well, in a minute, we're going to invite you to join us backstage, and we will go deeper into that, how your church has benefited from you being an EntrePastor, what that has done for your church. Les, is there any other questions you have before we start moving to the backstage area?
Well, I wondered about that. That's really intriguing what you just said about the kind of person that you're and the church family is starting to attract now, and we can talk more about it in a moment. But just on a surface level, is that because of what they pick up from you in maybe one-on-one conversations as they're talking to you about joining the church membership or joining the fellowship, or do you think it's just something that's an intangible that's where you've grown as a result of being in the marketplace as well as there in the local church ministry context?
I'll say this. All right. This might offend some people, but I'll say it anyways. I don't care.
Yeah, because we never offend anybody at all, do we, John?
No, never. I think I am a much better pastor and a much better preacher for my business success than I was before.
There you go. Mm-hmm.
It's just who I am. I mean, it's just who God made me to be. And it's endued me with, somebody told me this the other day. It's like, it's weird. Like you got this like extroversion and confidence that you did not have 3-4 years ago.
Yep.
And I don't think that's necessarily just a money in the bank. I think that's just, me doing what God made me to do, and finding some success in it. And so I think that attracts people. And then, I've always been sort of a cerebral kind of preacher, and, that was going to eventually change the kind of people that came to our church anyways too. So those two things.
Well, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, let me ask you this before we sign off the main part of the interview here. Well, first of all, I got maybe one more quick question. What advice would you give to a pastor that is considering jumping into some form of business? Like what, if you had a minute just to address them and encourage them, what would you say to them?
I would say, don't sell yourself short. You probably have gifts and talents that are very, very valuable in the business world. And you are probably, going to do fairly well with it. It's a painful and expensive education. I'll say that. So don't expect success tomorrow. Expect to struggle with it for at least a year or two. But there are enormous benefits to be made on the other end of that. So that's advice I give people.
I love that, man. If someone wanted to reach out to you and connect with you, first of all, are you open to that? And second,
oh yeah, of course. Yeah. You can find me on Twitter. I think it's Ryan Hayden. So Ryan minus the A, Ryan Hayden on Twitter. That's probably where I'm most active. And you might not like me if you follow me on Twitter, but that's fine. And then I'm on Facebook as well, Ryan Hayden. BibleBaptistMattoon.org is our church website. BuildOnline.io is our business's website. So that's.
Well, Ryan, I'm grateful that we have you in our Facebook community, and I know that you have already added tremendous value there, and will continue to through this podcast episode. And just grateful for the time that you've shared with our audience coming on the show today. Thank you so much.
All right. Yeah. When we get into this backstage talk, I just thought of what I want to talk about, if that's okay.
Yeah, totally.
Sure.
I have in my mind, I think a much better solution for most small town rural churches than what currently exists. And I think our church has kind of become a model of that. and I'd like to discuss that. So if you
Awesome.
pastor in a small town or maybe inner city, I think the same thing would be true. And you're not in a mega church, I think you might find the Backstage Pass part interesting.
That's got me leaning in already. I can't wait to hear it. So thank you so much, Ryan. We'll see you backstage here very shortly.
Thanks, Ryan.
I feel like it's the worst thing in the world to be blowing your nose in the middle of a podcast interview.
I hear you. I keep muting the cough, so we will get through this. So,
That's right.
All right, let me, I'm keeping the recording going. We'll just edit it later, do it a little different. So Anyway, here we go. Well, we are backstage with Ryan, and Ryan, right before we went off the regular interview there, you mentioned kind of a new model or an idea that you have, especially for small town rural churches, which absolutely gets my attention. That's my space, man. That's where I have been and serving for many, many years. And so when I hear someone set it up like that, I'm leaning in. Tell me more.
Yeah, he threw out a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So, and I'm inner city, so I'm all ears as well.
Okay, so the average church size in the United States, the average weekly attendance is, I think, less than 80 people. That's a typical church in the United States.
Yep.
Of course, there's huge churches, and we know that. And this stuff that what I'm going to talk about does not apply to that. But if you're in a church in a small town or in the inner city or someplace, and you have 80, 90, 100 people, 60 people, something like that, what does the budget for that church look like? Unless your church is just full of daddy warbuckses, you're probably running somewhere between $90,000 and $200,000 a year for your whole church budget for the year, I would guess, maybe less than that. So how is your church going to minister to people effectively at that small size if they're paying the pastor, one guy, a significant amount of that money? This is where our church was. Our church a couple years ago, had maybe $80,000 was our annual budget. It's probably triple that now, but a couple years ago it was like 80 grand. And our church was paying me, maybe 45 of that $80,000 after health insurance and my salary. So how do you have a youth pastor? How do you have a professional music director? How do you do anything when so much of your budget is ate up by one person? And then that one person is struggling, like $30,000 a year is not that much money. Right. I've got 4 kids, you're really struggling to make it on that amount of money. I think a lot of people, there's a lot of pastors, and that's exactly where they're at. Yep. Would you agree? They're just struggling. So this was sort of an accident for us, but I really think this is the way that I really would love to see more churches embrace this on purpose. And that is, our church now pays, nobody gets a salary at our church now. So everybody who is on the pastoral staff at our church gets a monthly stipend. And for us right now, it'll probably go up next year, but for us right now, it's just $1,000 a month. Okay. But $1,000 a month is enough to greatly increase, that's most people's mortgage payment or most people's, if they have a couple cars, that's their car payments. That's a huge chunk of your monthly budget. And then we take care of all of out-of-pocket expenses and health insurance if they don't have health insurance from their other job. So that's a huge blessing to people. And then we just don't have high expectations for them besides just faithfulness to their Sunday morning. At our church we do three services a week, but outside of like just the regular, for me, I preach and I show up at activities, and I don't have a whole lot of responsibility outside of that. I try to visit people when they're sick and like anybody else, but it's not like they expect me to be in the office 8 hours a day. I just think for me, like if you just encouraged people to find some other way to support themselves they'd be happier because they wouldn't be financially struggling. And your church is going to do much better, I think, if it has a multitude of talented people working in it and not just giving all of its money to one person. I'm interested. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I'll jump in first, Les. I think I love what you're saying there, Ryan. One of the things I'm keying in on that's a big part of that equation is the word expectation, because so often in the traditional, especially small town rural church, we give that quote unquote full-time salary, which isn't a very good salary to begin with. And
Right.
with that comes beyond full-time expectations of, we want you in the office, we want you at every church event, we want you, Pastor, that's why we pay you. You are the guy who does the work of the ministry. And so that to me is the key. If a church body would recognize, hey, we can actually bring more people on the team. If we really lower the expectation we have on this person we call the pastor and let them, get out in the marketplace and do something that really benefits their family far more than we could with our limited resources, to me, that is the key. And where you have churches resistant to that, I think you're going to continue to see their pastors struggle. But I agree with you. I think what you just described is quickly becoming the new normal. And we're going to see more and more of that in the years to come in the church. So I love it, man.
I mean, if our church, I am never going to not be a pastor. I will walk away from the business stuff in a heartbeat. That's God made me to be a preacher, I can't imagine doing anything else. But if our church were to grow suddenly to 300 people, 500 people, I'd still run my business. Like I wouldn't change a thing, I just think it puts you in a healthier mind space when you're working, then, and it's not easy. I mean, I manuscript 3 sermons a week. Like, I don't know anybody, I've done that for 10 years. I don't know anybody that writes that much, that's like 1,100 words a week or something, 11,000 words a week. Like that's an insane amount of preparation that I'm doing. It's not easy. It wears on you sometimes, and I'm sure it'll take its toll eventually, but like, I still feel like I'm better as a pastor for having work outside of the church. I think it gives me a better insight on what our church people are going through, because like they're going to work every day. They have their struggles and the pressures of the office. I think sometimes when you're just full time, the church is your only world, and you sort of like inflate the importance of that in everybody's mind. Of course, the church is important, right? But you overschedule. Like we're very hesitant to fill up the schedule, because we know people are busy and we don't want to like overload them with things and take away all their family time. There's just all kinds of stuff that are benefits of that. And then financially, my church is like, we need a new building. Our church is packed every Sunday. We have the tiniest auditorium I've ever seen. You can fit 100 people in there. And we fit 100 people in there like every week. We need a new auditorium, but our church is very debt resistant. And because of this, we will save $50,000 this year towards a new auditorium. We'll keep doing that as our church continues to grow and more money is coming into the church. Just such a great thing. I think it's been a great thing for our church.
Love it. That's so good.
And yeah, we're seeing that too, Ryan. We're in the middle, whether it's intentional or not, we are in the middle of a paradigm shift, and a new model is really a new old model is emerging once again out of necessity. And that's not a bad thing. So we're hearing that in versions of your story, whether it be church planners or established churches or rural or inner city, we're all sort of in this same thing that's going on, and there are solutions to it. And hopefully, through conversations like this one, Jon and I, along with many others, really want to help facilitate those changes to somebody that wants to step into that new model.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much, man. This has been super helpful. I know that our audience is going to be blessed by hearing this and encouraged and inspired. So thank you for your time and your willingness to come on the show. And thank you for being a part of our community, my friend. We're so glad to have you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you for doing it.
Thanks, Ryan.
Well, hey, thanks for watching this episode of the EntrePastors podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we release a new episode. If you'd like to get connected to other pastors who are learning to think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs, then we invite you to check us out on Facebook. Just search for the EntrePastors Connect group, answer a few of our simple questions there, and we'd love to include you in the conversations. And if you're really ready to go to the next level, then we invite you to join our EntrePastors membership community. When you become a monthly subscriber, you will receive access to courses, exclusive community, and coaching that will help you along in your own EntrePastors journey. If there's anything else we can do to serve you, please visit us at EntrePastors.com, and we will do our best to serve you there. God bless everybody. See you soon.